Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our workshop, Estate Planning Secrets. We're very happy that you've joined us today, and we're excited to provide you with some exclusive information and resources that will give you a deeper understanding of us and our services. Thanks again for attending. We are very excited to share this information with you today, and Jenny has been looking forward to this all week. My name is Emily, and I'm the marketing director for Clinkscales Elder Law Practice. We have our main office located in Hayes and our other office located in Wichita, but we do serve clients and families throughout the entire state of Kansas. We are able to connect through in-person meetings, phone calls, and also lots of Zoom computer meetings such as this one as well. So we're able to help everyone no matter where they're located at. I would like to invite you all to ask any questions that you may have in the chat box that's located at the bottom of your screen, and Jenny will address any of those questions or concerns that you may have. So without any further ado, I would like to hand it over to our attorney and managing partner, Jenny Walters, to get us started.
All right, thank you, Emily. And she was right. If you have a question, just jump in. Questions are great. There's no stupid questions when it comes to this stuff. Take advantage if you have anything on your mind as I'm going through, and Emily will keep tabs on that and just interrupt me, or we'll have some time at the end. Okay. So this is for you. You can have a little checkbox, decide if you're on the right presentation. If you do not have an estate plan or an estate plan that's out of date, meaning let's say it's 10 years old, 7 years old, or you're not sure. It's back when your kids were born. You're not sure what your estate plan does or how it works or whether it will even work. Maybe you have this thing that says it's a trust, but you don't know what that means or if it was set up correctly. Maybe you have a will. Does that mean a probate or not? You don't know. You want to preserve and protect your property for your spouse and your family. You want to be sure your wishes are followed, and you're concerned about paying for long term care if you cannot stay home. So, this is definitely for you if any of those apply. And if they don't, you might still learn something anyway. So, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you want? Do you want to stay home as you age? Have a plan that ensures and empowers someone to carry out your wishes? Have a plan that you understand and know will work? Know how to pay for care? And just have the peace of mind that you won't lose everything to long term care, which is probably one of the number one things I hear when I meet with people. So I would assume that this applies to everyone. But first, let's talk about us. Who is Clinkscales? This used to mean it was Randy Clinkscales because he started the office in 1983, which coincidentally is the same year I was born. So you can do the math on that. We're pretty unique for a law firm. We're an elder law firm. Sometimes that's confusing. Do we sue nursing homes? Do we represent elderly people that are, in lawsuits? No, what this means for us is we have this holistic approach to help families preserve their dignity, their health, their finances, their legacy, and I'll get into a little bit more about what that means as we go along. But our goal is to not just have a transactional relationship with our clients and here's your will and good luck on your rest of your life, especially if you have a chronic illness or are dealing with caregiver issues. Our goal is that we have a relationship with our clients for the rest of their life. That's the way we do things. That's the way we like to do things. And that's how Randy made this his practice when he was taking care of his grandma. And I will get to that story. We practice throughout Kansas, and we have physical offices in Wichita and Hayes. One of the things that makes us so unique is we have care coordinators on our team, and two of them are registered nurses, Jessica and Amy. Jill is a social worker. They all have extensive long-term care nursing home experience. They all have training in dementia. This is what they love to do, is deal with people with chronic illnesses, dementia, just aging issues. And so we have them as a member of our team to take care of those questions for our families. And I wanted to touch on, there's more of the team than that. We have benefit specialists, we have receptionists and marketing and intake. And actually, this isn't all of the team. We just haven't gotten everybody on our website, but There are individual pictures of everyone if you're curious, but this is just an example that there's a lot more of us behind the scenes. A little about me. I don't like talking about myself, but we'll cover it a little bit. I've been in this area since 2009, which is actually right out of law school. I was lucky enough that Randy was ready to expand and grow, and I landed here almost 15 years ago and have been here ever since. And I focus on people with aging and chronic conditions, how to protect assets, how to qualify for Medicaid and not go broke. That's a lot of what I do is Medicaid planning, as well as estate planning before a crisis happens. And a little bit about my life. I've got 2 kids and animals. The newest addition is this hot mess of a dog, Junie. She's getting better. She's almost a year old. And I am married, but he's not as cute, so I didn't put him in the photos. All right. So why are we all so passionate about this? And this is what I alluded to, the story of Randy and his grandma. And if you've been on these before, everybody, unless you're new, you have heard the story of Randy and his grandma because it is so important. This is really how it all started. He became her primary caregiver, and she wanted to stay independent, stay out of the nursing home, protect her assets so she could maintain her lifestyle. He needed some caregiver assistance, and he really needed to have a plan and a guide. And at that point, he became aware of some other law offices that were practicing elder law the way we do now, and he switched the law office, and that's what we've been doing ever since. And he was able to hire his first care coordinator, who helped guide him on caring for his grandma and learned about all the financial tools. And so that's really the origin story of why we do it this way. And for him, he really believes that the journey can be, and it was wonderful, and it's because he had a plan. And you need a plan to adequately and effectively take care of yourself, your spouse, and your family. So here we go. We're going to get into it. What is the secret? There's a couple. I'm going to cover 3, 4. There's 4 secrets. So first of all is how to keep the government out of this, how to keep them from controlling your property, your decisions, your affairs, your retirement, because this is a real issue. And it's not something everyone thinks about, because while you have capacity, you can control your life. You can control everything. The issue becomes if you lose capacity and you don't have a plan, the government and the court has to step in, because no one has the automatic right to take care of you and to legally handle things for you. And again, no one automatically has that, not a spouse, not a kid. You either have to be on an account, or we'll talk about the other power of attorney. There has to be something connecting you or giving you legal authority. And you can determine who has that authority and what authority they have. And in order to do that, you need the proper documents. And it's not just forms to fill out. They're personalized. There's more to it than that. Again, let's go through this a little more detailed. If you're incapacitated, we've already established nobody has the right to act for you. So where does it go? That means that presumably your family or someone has to go to court to be appointed as your guardian and or conservator to have the legal authority to make financial and healthcare decisions for you and to just take care of things for you. It's paid for with your money. Sometimes it requires bonds. And especially for us when we're planning, sometimes it's unavoidable. It happens. People lose capacity, and this is the only choice. But we do some complicated planning when we're doing Medicaid planning and planning to protect assets. And sometimes that put risk. If we have a conservatorship in place, we are limited on the planning we can do, or we have to go get court permission, or just think about things like running a business, running a farm. So we want to avoid this if at all possible. And along with that, so that was incapacity. If you die without a will or a trust, then you go into what's called intestate proceeding, where your property gets passed to your beneficiaries according to what the law says. And the law says that if you're married, your spouse gets half, and then your kids get half. And you can imagine how that causes some problems. And I'm going to get into an example of that. If you have minor children, there has to be a conservatorship for them, or if there's an adult disabled person. And so it just gets, you lose control of it, and it can get a little messy if there's some family dynamic issues, if there's property that gets split up. So how do we avoid this? What are those documents that I was talking about? So the foundational documents are the financial power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, living will, and a will or a trust. Start with the financial power of attorney. And with both powers of attorney, this is where you list someone called an agent to take care, that has the legal authority to act in your place if needed. We usually like to list one agent and a backup. If a guardianship or conservatorship is ever necessary for you, let's say you lose your judgment, you start making poor decisions, then sometimes a guardianship or conservatorship is necessary to really take control. But if not, things can be handled by a power of attorney. And there's a question of how much power is in the document. A power of attorney document is only as good as what is actually listed in the document. It's common to think, well, I have a power of attorney, I'm good. Well, what's in it? What powers are in there? That's what the life insurance company is going to care about. That's what's going to matter if we're trying to protect a home and transfer it around. And so Kansas law says that there are some powers that have to be specifically listed in the document. And if they're not, you can't do them. And those powers are listed here. They include the homestead powers, gifting, setting up a trust, changing beneficiaries. And so we almost always put all of those powers in our documents so that we know as we go into the future, we have all the tools we need to do whatever planning we need. And if I run into a power of attorney that's missing something, which is pretty common because there's quite a few of those optional powers, we get it updated so we know we have everything. Moving to the healthcare decisions, we want to have a healthcare power of attorney, which gives someone the ability to make healthcare decisions in your place if you cannot. Going along with that is a declaration, also called a living will, that gives the direction to your healthcare power of attorney agent and your doctor that if you have some sort of terminal condition that you're going to die from, you don't want anything that's going to artificially prolong your dying process, like a respirator, ventilator, tube feeding, that kind of thing. We also recommend having a do not resuscitate, a DNR, in some circumstances. If you've got a loved one with a condition that you know if they are revived, they're just not going to be the same, or somebody can make that decision for themselves, that I'm at the point where if I'm dying, if I have a heart attack, don't resuscitate me, don't do compression, CPR to bring me back. That's something you do with your doctor. That's not something we prepare. And then a HIPAA authorization, so that if you've got other family members that you just want to be able to get healthcare information for you, you can put them on that authorization. And finally are the documents that really deal with your estate, like a will or a trust. Generally, people want to avoid probate. We like to avoid probate because we don't like doing it. It's a pain, it's not necessary, it's extra cost. We like to build in asset protection. If we've got a husband and wife, let's say husband's in long-term care, well, what if the wife dies? In that situation, we don't just want to dump everything back in the husband's name and have more exposed to being spent on care. So we always build in protections in there as a safety net. We always want to have flexibility to plan for long-term care and not have a trust that we're just locked into and can't can't change if the Medicaid rules require it. And always having contingency plans. What if somebody predeceases you? What if a beneficiary is disabled? And I'll kind of get into having a more effective plan, but that's really having a good foundation of documents that have the flexibility and the contingency in there, as well as staying out of court. So let me give you an example of how things can go wrong. We've got the facts are real, the names have been changed. So we've got a husband and wife, no estate plan, no powers of attorney. They've got a farm. Some of the farm is joint tenancy. Some of it is in the husband's name because sometimes it was bought and it was just put in his name. Like that happens. People don't know exactly how their land is owned. And they've got farm equipment and livestock. They went home to think about it, and the husband had a stroke, lost capacity, eventually passes away, and she had no power of attorney to get everything done before he died. So the joint property, what's the result? The joint property transfers to the wife as a surviving joint owner. The other property, though, has to get probated because it was just in his name. And remember back to those intestate the laws that say that half goes to the spouse, half goes to the kids. So now we've split up real estate, and with farm ground, it's hard enough. So there were some family difficulties and some tax consequences, but it all got put back together, but it wasn't fun. So after that, we set up an irrevocable trust to really protect the land from any Medicaid lien, any creditor, got powers of attorney in place with the right agents, and just set up everything to protect assets. And an example of this is if you're in an accident, then you've got everything really how it should be and protected. And I've got a question on here that I think the question is, our trust and powers of attorney are about 5 to 7 years old. Is it time for an update? I'd say I'm pretty comfortable with 5 to 7, that's relatively recent. But it's certainly if situations change, just because your documents are still good doesn't mean your life is still the same. You know, is your health the same? Are your goals the same? So if there's any question about whether it's time, I think it's worth asking. But I don't think there's a hard rule to say, well, it's 7 years old, we got to have it looked at.
And Jenny, I
That's
think,
not.
oh, sorry. Their question started out with that they have their land in Kansas and now they live in Texas. So I think that part was part of the
Oh, that
question
makes
as
sense.
well.
Okay. If I just know in Kansas, we've got those specific powers and powers of attorney. I don't know what Texas law is. And so I think the best answer is if you live in another state, you should consult someone to make sure your documents are okay if you plan on being there. Because what if you need planning done there and the law is different and you don't have something in your documents that you're supposed to have? So I would. Okay. And finally, just a comment from Mrs. Wright that we should have done something when we came in. Our delay cost us over $40,000 and created a lot of stress for me and my children. So what do you need to do for this to avoid this? Is schedule a strategy session, and I'll get to this at the end what that involves. And act before capacity is an issue. We never have a crystal ball. Nobody ever wants to think, including me, you're ever going to be incapacitated, but just don't know. It's better just to get it in place, get your goals in your documents, and get the right agents in place so they have all the powers they need, and just don't give up on it. Don't put it off. There's solutions to it, and it's a relatively painless process once you get it into it. Okay. Secret 2, utilizing an effective estate plan. So we've talked about the general documents, what needs to be in them, but it needs to be more specific to your situation, your goals, your family, and we'll get into it. Do you have disabled children? Do you have somebody that's not good with money? Do you have somebody, a spouse with dementia? Do you have farm ground you need to protect? Are there tax concerns when we talk about can we gift property to somebody or we lose the step up in basis? And to just make sure the people that you've appointed, your trustees and your agents, have all the knowledge and the instructions, because communication is really, you can have the documents, but communication is always really important so that they know your wishes and aren't left questioning or having to go to court and fight about anything. And finally, just because you have the documents, your plan isn't effective unless your assets are actually set up correctly to work with your plan. And sometimes we call this funding. So as an example, most of these for this secret are examples of how to apply this concept. So we got Mr. and Mrs. Augustine. They want to transition their farm to their children. They started to sell it, but then the concern was capital gains taxes because, and many of you may know this, but if you sell real estate, if it has gained in value, you may be paying taxes based on the value when you acquired it, whether that was inherited or bought, and the new value when you've sold it. And generally that's higher. And if a farm ground sometimes has been in the family a long time, it was inherited 30 years ago, that may be a big difference and a big tax consequence. And not to mention, there's some unintended consequences of your Medicare premiums going up. And so what we did was, instead of selling it now and going through all these issues, is we put it in an irrevocable trust so that it was out of Mr. and Mrs. Augustine's name and protected from Medicaid, from a creditor. However, I might be getting a little more too detailed, but for estate tax purposes and capital gains, it would sit there for their lifetime, and then upon their death, transfer to the kids, and they got to step up in tax basis. Not to mention, we don't have these increased Medicare premiums, and the children could receive the income. So they accomplished their goal of wanting to transition it, but did it in a way that they still retained some of the benefits of the step up in basis and keeping their Medicare the same. Another example, the Jones family, they did a revocable trust after a trust seminar. If you don't know what this is, sometimes there are people that'll do these seminars and do just kind of boilerplate trusts for people, which is better than nothing. But if you've just got this standard document, it's not going to take into account the fact that they had a daughter with special needs and 2 children that were under 18. And then they had a home, accounts, some joint an investment account with the daughter, they have IRAs. And the issue is they've got this trust, but it wasn't funded, meaning it wasn't set up to actually go through the trust upon their death. And so upon death, the property will go through intestate succession. If there's not a will to go along with it, the account that's joint with the daughter goes to her. And so the solution was to set up everything through the trust. There were some tax benefits for the disabled daughter. We avoided having to do a conservatorship, and everything got distributed how it was supposed to. So to have an effective estate plan goes back to scheduling a strategy session, getting those documents in place so that your goals are accomplished and they're specific to your situation. And finally, and really importantly, is to make sure your plan is funded correctly, meaning your assets are set up correctly to actually work with your plan. Number 3, ways to pay for care. And this is, especially in our area, being elder law attorneys, this is a really common concern and a really valid concern, because at least where I'm at in Hayes, there's a facility that is approaching $10,000 a month. And that can just, unless you're a multi-millionaire, that can start draining things. Even if you're a millionaire, if you're in there long enough, that's going to start draining it. And so I want to remind everyone that you get to make the decision on how to pay for care. You don't have to go broke just because you need long-term care, and learn how government benefits can assist, like Medicare, Medicaid, and VA. So here's an example. We got Mr. and Mrs. Lundgren, they're a farming family, which we see a lot of in this area. And he has dementia, but still actively farming and has capacity. So this isn't a crisis situation. We've got some time, we've got some opportunities, but he's understandably concerned about what's going to happen years from now. He's concerned about his wife and his kids. So the solution was to set up really broad powers of attorney with all those powers. We did an irrevocable trust to protect the land. A caveat, hear me talk about these irrevocable trusts, it's something we can set up if we feel like we've got at least 5 years before someone will need Medicaid, because Medicaid has a 5-year look back period on gifting. So we had that window, or felt like we did. So we did the irrevocable trust, made sure the agents knew about care instructions and his wishes. And even though it may be several years before he ever needs assistance, his goals are guaranteed through his estate plan, his land's protected, he remains in control. And with the power of attorney, there's even the option to protect more resources going forward if he does need Medicaid, and really took the pressure and the guilt off of his family. Another example, little different example that has long-term care insurance factored in, and I don't run into a lot of people that have it. It is helpful when it's there. The thing is, though, you got to look into it early. Like if you're 70, I don't know what the cutoff is, but there's a point where it's going to be prohibitively expensive, or you're just not going to qualify. But we have Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. They're in their 70s, so this did work out for them because of the products that were available to them. Had a stroke with dementia, is in the hospital, needed to be discharged. They had pretty good income, home, investments, accounts, and a business worth $500,000. But importantly, I'm sorry, they already had long-term care insurance that paid $200 a day for 3 years, which is pretty decent. That's close to what it's going to cost today in long-term care. The issue is how to pay for care. What if they used up the long-term care insurance? Because remember, it's for 3 years. It's not unlimited, and I don't see a lot of unlimited policies anymore. And they wanted to make sure something was reserved for the spouse and the kids. What we did was help transition Mr. Johnson to a skilled facility, so Medicare would pay. That's something our care coordinators get into frequently, is making sure things are done correctly so that Medicare will cover a stay and it won't end up being private. Developed a plan for him to come home, and the long-term care insurance policy had a provision to pay for home care. And so we could protect resources from those costs. And the result was that he got covered by Medicare and went home with the assistance of the long-term care policy. The main takeaway is that by getting involved early, we were able to make sure Medicare paid, and make sure that he was at the point where he could come home safely, and make sure that long-term care insurance policy was triggered, which can be a whole other issue for people. And one more example. This one also involved insurance. So recently retired the Schmidts. They had $350,000 in IRA, $200,000 investment, $300,000 in home, and 3 kids and 5 grandkids. And their concern, understandably, was what if one of them gets sick? Assets are going to be completed, $10,000 at a time potentially, and the spouse will be impoverished, and they really want to leave money to their grandkids. The solution was a hybrid life insurance policy with a long-term care rider. They probably bought it in a lump sum, and now there's a lot of products that it's not just standard long-term care insurance. You can get life insurance that will let you access the death benefit, and so they were able to take advantage of these products. And now if something does go wrong, they've got some extra money they can access to pay for care. Finally, a crisis example, and I get involved in these a lot. Sometimes people don't plan, sometimes they plan to their best of ability and things just go wrong. But there's still options. That's the most important thing, is every step of the way here, there's options. Even if the option is, there's no money left in getting on Medicaid, but the earlier the better. The earlier you start, the more options there are. But we did have somebody with dementia, Mrs. Smith. She went to the hospital, discharged to the nursing home, paying $8,000 a month, which is right on average. She had a retirement account of $300,000, a joint account of $60,000 with her husband, and he had Social Security and she had Social Security. And they were told by the nursing home they need to spend down all the resources before Medicaid would help. And Mr. Smith would need to use his income to help pay for her care. And then Medicaid would put a lien on the home. Well, that would worry somebody. And that's not uncommon I hear all kinds of stories, whether it's from coffee shop talk or long-term care facilities or just talking to people who had a parent that went through something. I hear all kinds of incorrect information about Medicaid and how the state's going to take everything and how it's all going to have to be spent. And that's just not true. There are rules, Medicaid rules to protect spouses so they also don't go on Medicaid because they're impoverished. And really that's a lot of my job, is to know those rules and apply them to situations so we can protect people. And so in this situation, the solution was to use some of those Medicaid tools, make sure we had powers of attorney and everything to do it, restructure some of the assets, shift them around, and qualify her for Medicaid in a way where Mr. Smith was able to keep the assets and his income and able to support himself. And believe it or not, that can happen when you have a married couple. So the result was he was not forced to go broke. He had enough income to take care of himself. And there's no lien on his home because, side note, we usually put the home in the well spouse's name. And we kept an eye on her, monitored her care, helped him be an advocate for her. And that's back to our goal is to work with families who are in this sort of situation for the rest of their life. And I want to add a small note about VA. We're running into fewer and fewer veterans. However, sometimes the VA benefit can help pay for home care, assisted living, and it's tax-free. So we always keep an eye on if someone would qualify for that benefit. And just to comment about our office, that I got a situation where someone felt like they would have lost everything if we hadn't gotten involved, that it would have been a train wreck. And we created a plan to the goal of keeping mom safe and protecting assets. And if they hadn't done it, they felt like they would have lost the small farm and property, and it was well worth it. And one from Tad. When his wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, he tried to care for her herself. And this is a true story. I know exactly who this is. His son was a doctor, told him he needed to get help or they would both end up sick, which is true. Many times the caregiver crashes as well. And his banker also recommended us, and we helped him care for him. We're actually still helping him. And his wife, and monitoring her care. And whenever he has a question, he picks up the phone. So if this is a concern, paying for care, again, schedule a session with us. We'll explore all of the options. We'll get powers of attorney in place. And our goal is always to get and pay for good care without going broke. And finally, how to stay at home. And for most people, this is the most important. And it's also important to know that it's not just being at home and going to the nursing home. There are options in between. There's home care, there's assisted living, there's independent living, there's these places called Home Plus. It's not the same as home. And I also want to add that we run into situations where, the goal and the mentality is always to stay at home, but sometimes having a different living environment where you're getting good care, where you're getting good meals, where you're getting socialization, people really improve in that. So I don't want to just say the best goal is always to stay home, but certainly if that's the goal, that's what we're here to help do. And I'm going to finish up this one thing, and then I'm going to get to the question. And I wanted to share this. This is Randy's grandma. This is actually her. This is Thelma. And he shares this quote a lot. She told him, honey, I know someday I'll have to go to the nursing home. I just don't want to know about it. And actually, the way it worked out, that she didn't actually have to go, or for a very short period of time, because Randy's mom, this is, her daughter that was living with Thelma, died unexpectedly. He was 500 miles away. She had health issues. She was frail, depression, and not a lot of resources in a home. She wanted to live independently and alone. But the issues were her money. She may need hospice. Her healthcare provider was urging the nursing home, and she was remote from her family. And he was able to find resources in the community. She stayed in her home for 6 years. She moved to assisted living in Hayes, actually, for 4 years with some advocacy. And she went on hospice. She went off hospice and only had to spend 50 days in the nursing home and died at 96. And the lesson for him was with guidance. Remember, he had one of our care coordinators walking with him through this. The transition can be gradual, the support for caregiver is critical, and resources can be stretched to achieve goals. And I want to do this one. I think I've got, yeah, just a couple more. Another example, Lane and Lisa came to us. They were in their 70s, and Lisa had MS. Lane had scoliosis. They had children in other states, and they were busy, like most families are. And Lisa just transitioned to an electric wheelchair. The issue was Lane realized he was going to be unable to lift her much longer. And that's a big issue generally, is being able to lift somebody and transition them and, get them to the restroom and to bed and dressed. And they tried finding home help, but really didn't know what they were doing. And they'd been through several people, which is a common issue. And they were both concerned that Lisa may need to go to the nursing home for the sake of Lane, so he didn't crash. Financially, it wasn't an issue, but even if you have a lot of money, you still got to find the care, and it can be overwhelming. So what we did is we stepped in and found reputable caregivers. We had to convince them a little bit to accept the help and that it would work, and monitored them and really made it work so they could stay at home longer and just have that peace of mind that they had somebody looking out for them. And a comment from Sherry, her husband had Parkinson's. We helped her keep him as home as long as possible. And we showed her how to be a better caregiver. That's something our care coordinators help do, is help people communicate with their loved ones if they have dementia, help them kind of take a step back and have somebody to lean on so they don't burn out, mentally or physically. And a comment from Pat, my husband needed nursing home care. You guided me through the process. Care coordinators made sure he was getting good care, and she highly recommends us because we were always there for her and guided her through everything and things she never expected to go through. We don't have that crystal ball to know how things are going to go. So if any of this is concerning to you, if you're facing aging or a chronic illness or a loved one, meet with us for a strategy session. Don't wait. Like I said, the earlier we're involved, the more options there are, the less pressure it is, and don't give up. There's solutions. I'm going to get to the question. Okay, I already have a trust. Do my daughters and I need to review my trust? I think it's good. Again, communication is always good for people to know what documents you have, how they work, just in case they need to step in. I know that's not always a comfortable conversation, but I think the more openness and the more communication, the better. And there's a comment, I want to stay at home, so we would like to meet and make sure all investments, house protected, not well versed in Medicare, Medicaid area. Not anybody is, unless you've been through it from beginning to end and been through a Medicaid application. No one is, and it's confusing. It's confusing enough just to know what the difference between Medicare and Medicaid and not confuse them. So that's absolutely something we would go through and get those questions from you to explain what those things mean, how they work, how you protect assets. And so far you've discovered there's documents that empower others to act for you, to keep the government out of it, to protect your wishes. There is planning available to help you pay for care without losing everything, without being a burden on your children or your family. And there are ways to stay at home. And out of all that, we've been through 40 minutes now. I hope you get this, that for most of us, we don't want to think about it. It's uncomfortable, but at some point, someone will be trying to carry out our wishes. And with proper guidance, you can plan, direct, and control that. So how do you make that happen? How it works with us is we have a short phone call to be sure we can help you, just get some basic information. And then we may schedule a 30 to 60-minute meeting in person, by Zoom, or a call with me or one of our other attorneys, depending on the situation, where we will discuss your financial and legal needs, review your estate plan, establish some goals, and answer your questions for your unique situation. Got a question, as is good timing. I don't understand the difference between will or trust. Why doesn't the beneficiaries or transfer on death suffice? And that is, it's difficult on here to get into all those different options because there is an option to do beneficiaries or transfer on death. There's some pros and cons of doing that, a will versus a trust versus transfer on death. And that's something we would go over. That's something I go over with people, is the difference, what would best fit their needs, because there are different ways to do that. It just depends on the situation, what the best route is. And at the end of our time together, we'll have an analysis of your plan. You'll have better clarity, how to achieve your goals, and the exact amount of the investment that it will take to achieve those. After the meeting, after you decide to get started, we do a summary letter. We prepare the documents that would be signed by you at another meeting. We usually try to schedule that right away and put the documents in place. Again, it's not about the documents, it's about getting a solution in place, and then work with you on the next steps on that funding part of it, as far as the tools and the steps, as like doing deeds for your property and making sure your bank accounts are set up correctly. And on top of that, if you're dealing with a chronic illness or an aging issue, we may have a care coordinator involved in that meeting. And there was a question as far as what will it cost? Gosh, you guys are just being great as far as good timing. So I'm going to get to that. My personal guarantee is that if you talk with us, you'll know more than you did before. And I hope today you know more than you did before today. You'll have an analysis of what happens if you do nothing, and you'll realize there are options available to guide and protect you and your family, and your time will not be wasted. I've actually never met with anybody that felt like their time was wasted. And by being on here today, normally that consult would be a $650 value. If you book that strategy session today, it is free. And I know that sounds too good to be true. So what's the catch? We do have limited spots. And Emily and I were actually talking before this that Randy is actually on vacation. And so there are less spots available. And so the more quickly you call, the more we can guarantee that you'll get in timely. And we've got the phone number on here. And I also wanted to remind you that there will be a survey after this that you can click on, that the email is going to look like this, and that will help you get that strategy session as well. And also, we've got a book that if you do that Survey Monkey, what you really need to know for the second half of life, that Randy co-authored, and you'll also get a written summary of our recommendations. So again, call the number or click on the survey in your follow-up email. Don't forget to do that. And I hope that answered everybody's questions. Is there anything else? Because we've reached the end.
I don't see any additional questions in the chat box at this moment, but do go ahead and please feel free to add your questions now as we wrap up our presentation for this afternoon. Just a reminder, like Jenny mentioned, you will receive a follow-up email that has a SurveyMonkey link, and it just takes 2 minutes to put in your information. And if you want a strategy session, that's free, or if you want that book. So you just need to fill that out. That way we can send you that information. It also includes a recorded video of today. It will be a YouTube link, so that way you can share with family members or friends or anyone who wasn't able to join today. Or if Jenny went a little bit too quick or there was just a lot of information, you were taking notes, you can go back through and watch all of that information again. So go ahead and call our office or fill out that SurveyMonkey if you have any questions. I don't necessarily see, well, Jenny, I guess we have a question here. They had their trust set up recently with Clinkscales with the living will POA. Is there anything else that they need to do, or they're probably all set?
If there's a question about do we need it reviewed, again, generally just call the office. It's the same process. And then when we talk to you, we'll decide if it does need updated, if there's an extra cost. We just wouldn't know without knowing the situation and getting into the file. So just give us a call and we can take a look.
Perfect. That kind of answers the other question then.
Oh, I thought, okay, I think I missed the first one. Okay,
No,
perfect.
it was both. It was both.
Gotcha.
Both
I see there's two now.
questions.
Okay.
So there we go. It's kind of a 2-for-1 deal. So
Okay.
again, if you have any additional questions that come up, feel free to call our office or email me. Everyone should have my email from the login information. Otherwise, thank you all so much for being here today. And thank you, Jenny, for sharing that great information.